NASA lands and the Wind Training Center, Wind Research and Training Center. And my first thought was, wow, I mean, who knew that we had this facility here in the state of New Mexico? In fact, very few people to this day in the state even know that it exists. So one of the first things I did was come out and visit the center. I got a chance to meet Andy and to get to know Andy and the work that he's doing in training folks into these great jobs. And it was just shocking to me that the fact that it's a very little known treasure that we have, one of the few facilities of its kind in the entire country. And we need to be doing more to invest in facilities like this, and this one in particular. And I also want to thank Senator Woods for his leadership in supporting rural communities like Tucumcari. And he worked on a bill that I was supporting also called the House Bill 177 that's going to provide matching grants and technical support for communities to be able to apply for some of this new federal money that's now available. And that's what we're here for today, is to actually talk about one of the new big programs that are available that could help with economic development, workforce development, and community development here in Tucumcari, Quay County, and the region. So we're really happy to be having this meeting. Looking forward to being able to continue to work with you all on seeing this center and your community flourish as we move forward, hopefully with programs like this one. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy Roseborough from the New Mexico Environment Department. And I also just want to say that we're part of, my organization is part of a statewide coalition. It's called the New Mexico Thrives or Prospera Coalition. That includes 8 organizations, grassroots organizations around the state. And so we've been working with the Environment Department, Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources on getting community input and getting the word out about this, this program, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to have so many people here. We've done a few community events like this, and this is the best turnout we've gotten, and it's really great to be here and share space with you all and tell you a little bit about what we've been working on. I'm Amy Roseborough. I work for the New Mexico Environment Department, the Climate Change Bureau specifically. And lately, we have been all in on a grant program called the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, or the CPRG, like Michael just said. And where this funding comes from is through the Inflation Reduction Act, and it is administered by the Environmental Protection Agency. And it gives us the opportunity for 2 grants, the first one being a planning grant, and the second one being an implementation grant. The planning grant has already been awarded. NMED was awarded this grant as well as Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department from the state. And then the city of Albuquerque was also awarded a planning grant, as well as Sandia Pueblo, Santa Ana Pueblo, Navajo Nation, and then a coalition of pueblos led by Tesuque Pueblo. So a lot of planning grants were awarded to the New Mexico area. And that's great. It's a lot of funding coming in for climate action planning. But what does this give to the communities in New Mexico? Other than reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is a very high up award, it also brings workforce development, clean energy development, and energy efficiency, clean transit. A lot of economic development can be had through this program. And so it's just great opportunities around the state, and we're hoping to talk a bit about what we have planned with you all and get your advice. Next slide, please. So like I said, there's 2 primary purposes for the planning grant, the first being reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and the second is to provide beneficial impact to low-income and disadvantaged communities. And like I said, it can happen through reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which will provide health benefits, reduce energy burdens, give lower greenhouse gas emissions to specific neighborhoods that have been historically overburdened. And we plan on really figuring out what specific benefits the programs we're developing can give to communities by coming to communities and talking to you all and seeing what you all prioritize in climate action planning as well as economic development, and seeing where we can collaborate. Next slide, please. So I'm a visual learner. This graphic kind of shows the CPRG world in 4 steps. The first step is the Priority Climate Action Plan, which is what we are about to submit March 1st. Priority Climate Action Plan is really focused on what can the state do in the climate action world that will give us short-term results and efficiently cut greenhouse gas emissions while providing really good benefits to local communities. The second step of the planning phase is the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which will begin right after March 1st and into the summer and fall of 2025. The Comprehensive Climate Action Plan will be much more comprehensive. It'll include everything that the state will need to do in order to reach our climate action goals. And then lastly, we'll give a status report of all of the work that we've done through the 2 action plans and next steps and future needs for those. And then just one last thing on that last slide was that right after the Priority Climate Action Plan is due on March 1st, the CPRG Implementation Grant application is due on April 1st. And that is a competitive application that the state intends to apply for. Both the New Mexico Environment Department and Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources will apply. And it's due April 1st. It's a 5-year award, so being awarded in 2025, and then it'll go through 2030. And you can get awarded $200 to $500 million per application, totaling up for all the applications of 30 to 115 grants to be about $4.3 billion. Okay, so what we are trying to present to you, the meat of it, is what are we including in our planning grant? What are the measures that we've come up with that will both cut emissions for the state as well as provide benefits to you all? And before we get into that list, I just wanted to kind of prime you and tell you that this is not an exhaustive list of all of the climate actions that the state needs to take. It's really just a list of climate actions that we need to take more immediately and are able to take more immediately that will get us to where we need to be in the short term. And we're here to hear your thoughts on that. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask at the end of each measure description. And we'd really like to get your feedback specifically on what you think the benefits or challenges of each of these measures would be within your community. And so with that, I'll hand it off to my coworker, Colt.
Next slide, please. Good evening, everyone. My name is Colt Vaughn. I work for the New Mexico Environment Department, and I'm an environmental scientist. So thank you, Amy, for presenting general context about this grant opportunity that we're pursuing. I want to talk about the actual projects and programs that we're proposing to put forth in those plans, and talk a little bit about the actual projects that we hope to get the EPA to fund. So we're going to start off, we're going to go through each major sector of greenhouse gas emissions and talk about what we're trying to do in each of those sectors. And I know that probably most of you have heard some rumors flying around about this corridor project. So we're going to talk about that measure last. And we're really going to open it up and have some candid discussions about that opportunity. First, I want to talk about the other programs that are included. We are seeking your feedback on everything that's being presented here. So if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions across the state, and you start to add all of those up, you'll find that the greatest amount of emissions come from the oil and gas sector, specifically in their operations. And you may have heard that there are some new rules in place around methane or volatile organic compounds. And so those rules are the methane waste rule and the ozone precursor rule that you see in that top right box. And so those rules were enacted, I believe, last year, if I'm not mistaken. And they're designed to make sure that oil and gas operations aren't flaring or leaking large amounts of methane. And that's important because methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. It's about 25 times worse for climate change than CO2 or carbon dioxide. So it's really critical that if we're going to reduce emissions in the state, that we focus some of our attention on this particular measure, which is, so what we're talking about when I mentioned that we have these rules in place. Currently, under those rules, it requires the oil and gas industry to self-report on their methane or volatile organic compound emissions. And so what we are proposing is to establish a monitoring and verification program that will help us to pay attention to what the oil and gas industry is doing and making sure that they are complying with those state rules. This is also really significant in terms of public health. Volatile organic compounds are essentially the compounds that create ground level ozone. That ground level ozone could be really detrimental to people's health, and especially for folks who have pre-existing conditions or asthma or things of that nature, COPD. So by reducing those emissions, not only are we stopping the greenhouse gas emissions from warming our planet, but we're also making sure that the people living near our oil and gas operations have cleaner air. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. And so I've just sort of described the first program. And so you'll see around the room that we've got these like huge sticky notes up on the wall. And so after the presentation, what we'll ask you to do is to, do we have the dots? No? Okay. So we've got some pens and some markers. And so what we'll ask you to do is to just write down what your general thoughts are about each measure. So there's a pros and a cons side. And we're just looking for your general feedback about what might a particular program mean for your community. So if you can help us to identify those or tell us, I mean, you could tell us anything on these sheets. If you are really advocating for it, please tell us. If you're against it, tell us why. Just help us get a better sense of how this program might impact your community. So the first one that we talked about, monitoring and verification of methane, that's the first one here. And then it goes on and on and on until you get all the way around the room in the order that we're going to talk about these. All right, so I will take questions on each program as we're going, a couple, so we don't get bogged down with time. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, on your methane, you have a lot of coal deposits up in the same area, especially up in Farmington. There's any methane coming out of that, those coal deposits?
Coal deposits. I'm not sure, actually. You know that? Okay. Introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Angela Rasso. I'm also with the Environment Department. I work a lot on our emissions inventory, our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And we do quantify emissions from coal, usually from mining coal, not necessarily from the deposits themselves, right? If it's still underground, it doesn't usually emit.
But there's places up there that it's at the top of the
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's accounted for, but definitely we account for the actual mining. So when we do, we might be getting a little sidetracked here. Sorry. When we do our emissions inventory, we usually do kind of a what's called a bottom-up inventory. So we calculate, I should say, what we think the emissions are based on activities, right? So we're not monitoring the actual emissions.
You're estimating the release by the amount of activity in the area of oil and gas.
Exactly. So for oil and gas, we know the number of wells, for instance.
Activity, then there would be no methane,
Exactly.
is what you're saying.
Yep, that's exactly it. We do also,
Two sets of parameters.
so we get what's called an emission factor, right? So in oil and gas, we would take the number of wells and extrapolate how much emissions we get per well. We get those most from a variety of sources. Often academic papers will make estimates of what the emission factor is per amount of natural gas that you get from a well.
But you're talking about requiring more control on those emissions. So how are you going to factor that in?
So that gets factored in. We know what the controls we're requiring are, right? So for instance, for the NMED's methane waste rule, it requires that 98% of the natural gas be captured and not vented or flared, right? So we can say, okay, we know at most 2% will be vented or flared, as opposed to the current emission factor. Does that make sense?
I'm going to keep us
Yeah.
moving here. Any other questions on the methane program? You look like you're thinking about it.
Just more of a clarification thought, because I think what you're saying is that you're monitoring what is man-made activity, not necessarily what is in a natural situation. Is that what the clarification is needed?
Yeah, so most of our emissions inventory and most greenhouse gas emissions are based on man-made activity. There is also land use or land activity, right? So we know forests, trees absorb carbon dioxide. We also do account for that. It's called land use, land change, and working lands.
Okay. All right. So moving into the transportation sector, like I said before, we're going to skip over the corridor proposal because I think that's the one you're probably all most interested in. So I want to make sure that we have enough space at the end of this to really discuss that. But let me just give you very quickly a synopsis of what that proposal is. Essentially, we are partnering with the state of Arizona and the state of Oklahoma, and we are asking the EPA to fund a corridor project, the corridor being I-40, with the idea to bring goods in from the Port of Los Angeles all the way through our states and into Oklahoma. And the infrastructure that would be supported along the corridor will help zero-emission trucks, so battery electric and hydrogen-powered fuel cell trucks to get across that corridor. So right now, the infrastructure for these trucks is pretty sparse. And so we are putting a proposal together that will make all of I-40 across really the western half of the entire interstate a corridor that can be supported of those zero emission technologies. Okay, so we'll talk much more about that here in just a moment. But relatedly, we are proposing a clean truck incentive program, which is this vehicle medium heavy duty line here. And essentially what we are asking the EPA to fund is a program that lets us give vouchers to fleet owners across the state. And those vouchers will essentially apply to the difference in cost of a diesel truck compared to a battery electric truck or a hydrogen powered fuel cell electric truck. So we know that those, just take battery electric trucks, for example. We know that those cost more upfront to purchase than a diesel equivalent. It's because it's a new technology. Many of the manufacturers are still setting up supply chains, and because of that, they just tend to cost more upfront. However, these trucks do have a lower cost to operate, especially over the long term. If you compare the price of filling up a diesel truck and compare that with recharging your battery electric truck, the cost to do that is significantly cheaper to power with electricity. And so what we believe that we can do with this program is help fleet owners access the vehicles to begin with. And then once they are able to have better access, then once they put them into use and begin to operate them, then that fleet will also experience lower operating costs. Not only do you get those lower operating costs, but you also get the climate and air quality benefits. Tailpipe emissions, they contain particulate matter and NOx. Both of those are really bad for people's health. Again, for folks with asthma or COPD and likes, that can be really detrimental to their health. And so there's a real opportunity here to begin to transition our state, especially in these medium and heavy duty truck sectors. Okay, so the next one, well, let me pause. Are there any questions on the truck incentives?
You talk about this incentive will be geared toward fleet owners.
Yes, sir.
What about us individual people that have a truck and so forth? What's in it for us? Well, I mean, they already are operating at a size that is much more efficient than what we are.
Right.
But we still got to get our product to market and bring those inputs back to the farm or our small businesses and so forth. It seems like it's put a big disparity between the big people and the little individuals.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's a very good question. I'm going to repeat it for the folks online. Sorry we didn't do that earlier if you are online. So the question is, how are we ensuring that the quote unquote little guy has opportunity to access some of these benefits? The answer is we study other state incentive programs we're doing, and because there are existing programs like this around the country, and when we started having conversations with them about how they design their programs, that was a huge concern that they expressed to us, is that we're leaving behind maybe the owner operator who only has maybe one or two trucks. And so we were really conscious from the beginning about how we design this program. And so what we've done is we have a cap on the amount of incentives that larger corporations are able to get. It's up for medium-sized entities. And if you own or operate a fleet of, I think it's, I'm trying to remember. Well, if you're, let me frame it differently. If your company that you're operating, no matter how small or how big, if it's less than, if you're earning less than 15 million gross annual revenue, then there is no cap on the incentives that you would be eligible for. In addition to that, we have also built into the program what are essentially added voucher incentives. So if you have a fleet of 3 or less vehicles, you're eligible to receive even greater incentives. And one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is by truck, we're really talking about Class 2B to Class 8 vehicles. So a Class 2B truck could be considered a Ford Eco-Transit van, for example. And so there's all kinds of vehicles that fit into those categories. But what we're not talking about light-duty vehicles by any means. Pickup trucks are not eligible. They're not considered trucks in the sort of sense we're talking about it here. But if you're buying anything that's, a transit van or larger, and it's zero emission technology, it would qualify for these opportunities. So great question. Did I answer it for you?
Yeah.
Okay. And I saw one more.
So my question would be, these medium to heavy duty trucks, if they're all battery operated, what do those trucks weigh versus fuel?
Sure. The battery electric trucks, well, battery electric vehicles in general do way more than gasoline or diesel equivalent vehicles. But the same isn't necessarily true for hydrogen powered fuel cell electric vehicles. Having said that, though, I'm assuming you're kind of maybe worried about how that might impact our roads.
I'm worried about how it impacts the road, our structured roadways, you know. I-40 is not in the best of shape.
Sure. Yeah.
So with more of those trucks out, more heavyweight, you're either gonna haul less to keep them within the limit weight category, and you're gonna have more trucks out there.
Right.
Which still gonna do the same damage. I mean, just
Yeah.
more trucks is performance.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, and I get that. It is common sense. If you put more weight on the road, it could tear the road up quicker. But what I would also add is that the battery electric trucks, I mean, let's just take the Tesla electric semi truck, for example. It's probably one of the heaviest semi trucks on the road, but even that truck is well within the US DOT regulations about how much a truck can weigh and how much weight we can put on the road. So it's well within, excuse me, it's well within that regulation. But if you also wondering about how does that impact the capacity of the vehicle to transport additional weight, right? That is a concern. One thing we know, roughly 8% of trips that carry and move freight around this country are 200 miles or less. And so what that means is the existing battery electric typically have a range of 200 to 250 miles. And the Tesla, for example, they do have an option that goes all the way up to 500. But what that means is that, yes, you're reducing some of the payload that truck can carry, but you're also able to move those, like you said, you can move more goods with more trucks, and you can do it more efficiently. And if the routes are less than 200 miles a day, then there shouldn't be too many cases where it actually becomes a real problem. Does that help answer your question?
I guess one other question was, most of our funding for the roads comes from gas tax. What does it have to do with electric?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. So the short answer is of transportation is responsible for overseeing the administration of that. And I don't know if folks may know Jerry Valdez, NMDOT. He's working very hard on that very question and to try and figure out how to resolve that. We saw some proposals in the legislature this year about maybe how to compensate for that, because the electricity generation that goes into these trucks necessarily contribute to the to funding repairs of our roadways. But NMDOT, a lot of legislatures are certainly thinking how to solve that problem, and we're in conversation with NMDOT. I mean, we don't work in silos. We try to be honest and acknowledge what the problems are, and see if we can figure out how to solve those. So it's a good question. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move on just to keep us going here. So the next one is the Efficient and Clean Operations for Schools program. There's a little bit of an acronym there, ECO Schools, just make it shorter. So what we're proposing with ECO Schools is to provide first the charging infrastructure that's necessary to support electric school buses. And so we're also proposing to fund 85 electric school buses and deliver those to our schools around New Mexico. And when we first started exploring the potential of this project and meeting with schools themselves and their own fleet operators, one of the things that they told us is, well, that's great. There's all these federal programs and opportunities to take advantage of getting these electric school buses. But the problem that we found out is that the schools kept saying the same thing over and over, which is, if we don't have the infrastructure to be able to support the bus, then we can't take delivery of it, right? That totally makes sense. And what we did is we pivoted from trying to deliver a bunch of electric school buses to really focusing on the infrastructure itself. And so we're hoping that we can fund up to 300 plugs and deliver 85 electric school buses. And so obviously there's a gap in that number, but that allows for schools to take advantage of other programs that are out there to be able to acquire those electric school buses. The other part of the Eco Schools measure is that we are proposing to essentially have what are kind of called energy coaches. And those energy coaches will work directly with the school's facility operation folks and try to help them identify inefficiencies in their building operations and try to improve the efficiency of the facilities themselves, which has all kinds of benefits. Primarily for the school, they get a lower operational cost for electricity and things of that nature. Now, I'm really, this is probably my favorite program. It has really serious health implications for our children. And if you think about it, kids who are going to school and riding on these buses, you know, they're hanging out around these buses when they get on, when they get off, while they're riding it. And the whole time, that diesel engine is just sitting there operating, right? And those emissions are being inhaled by our children. And that has really, really serious ramifications for the children themselves. Because they're in adolescence and they're still growing and developing, that can impact not only their physical health, but their mental health. And it can lead to reductions in learning outcomes. It can just affect a child's entire day by inhaling those tailpipe emissions. So with a battery electric school bus, you don't have those tailpipe emissions. In some way, maybe you're moving, overall, you're emitting far fewer emissions with a battery electric vehicle, but you're also moving, source of the energy is coming from the grid, which is produced somewhere, right? You're still moving those emissions away from the children who are most impacted by emissions. So this has really serious health benefits for our kids in our schools around this state. Are there any questions on Eco Schools?
So the electric buses and vehicles way more. Do you have any plans to re-educate drivers on driving? Because most injuries from children in buses is from the drivers braking and the kids getting concussions and stuff.
Interesting.
For re-educating drivers?
We do, actually. So the question was, do we have a plan for re-educating drivers of electric school buses? And the short answer is yes. So one of the things that we haven't really talked about a whole lot in this grant opportunity is the EPA and writ large, the federal government, want to see economic development and workforce development as key components of everything that we're proposing. So they don't want us to set these programs up and then fail to have the workforce necessary to make sure that they're implemented correctly. So Michael Ford, raise your hand. he's our economist, and these are the kind of questions that we think about all day, every day. Is how do we build the workforce that's necessary to support all of these programs? And the driver program is a key component of that. And we've seen some training resources that exist out there, and we're exploring those opportunities. But we're also making sure that we have the technician to be able to take care of the vehicle itself, repair it, and to do all of those kinds of things that are necessary. We also know that if we're installing real world infrastructure, we need the folks who can support that, including electricians or renewable energy technicians. All of those kinds of jobs are what we're trying to create. And I think there may be some time at the end to maybe let Mike elaborate on some of the job components of this. But it's a good question. All right, any other questions about how Eco Schools works or anything like that? Go ahead.
Additional idea to that is if you're providing those buses that you can implement them with newer technologies that could do like brake assist or other situations that could help, even though you still have to do the training, yes, but you could help the driver.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good point. So, and I'll just elaborate briefly on that point. There's many electric vehicles have what's called one pedal driving. They still have two pedals. There's still a brake. Don't worry. But the one pedal system is designed so that in non-emergency situations, you can drive that vehicle basically with just the gas pedal. And when you let off that gas pedal, it actually starts to slow the vehicle down pretty quickly. It's not a hard stop. It's a relatively soft stop. But during that braking process, you're actually able to recapture some of the energy that's being generated, that momentum. And so that energy can go back into the vehicle to support even further range. So that is a critical component about what you're talking about. And I had one more thing on that, but it slipped my mind. Okay, so we'll move on. The last measure in the transportation sector is the Community Mobility Program. And so essentially what we are proposing is a program that helps reduce the amount of miles that people drive, which is a significant component of being able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's a lot of ways you can reduce that mileage, including things like ride sharing, senior mobility programs, e-bikes, regular bikes, and expansion of public transit. And when we've been traveling around the state, one of the things that we regularly hear is that there's a need for greater investment in public transit. And so by including this measure in our plan, we're essentially enabling municipalities across the state to be able to put forth their own grant applications to implement the measure or the types of programs that are critical in their own neighborhoods. There's a lot of flexibility about how this program can operate, but it is really designed because we know that transportation, by and large, is very different in different communities. And so we designed this program so that municipalities like the city of Tucumcari could possibly take advantage of those opportunities and to be able to go after funds to implement what's critical for them in their neighborhoods. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought I saw one. Okay. Are there any questions on this measure?
So you want to reduce the miles driven. Who determines? I mean, I may live 25 miles from town or 50 miles from town.
Sure.
And somebody else only lives a mile from town. How are you going to make that equitable?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. So the question is, how do we make reducing miles traveled more equitable? And let me just start by answering that question with, we're not proposing that each individual person reduce their mileage because of exactly what you're talking about. But
the first step.
So what we're talking about when we're talking about reducing the mileage traveled is really on a statewide basis.
I understand that, but that's the first step.
Right. And one way that you can get there, and like I said, it varies quite a bit by city, but when you have public transit available and functional, then you can actually reduce how many miles people are traveling.
In city
Okay.
transit, most of us are rural people.
Sure.
We don't live where we can catch a bus to come to town or something. We have to furnish our own vehicles at our own expense and over roads that are not so good a lot of times.
Right.
And you know, that you're telling us that you're going to reduce those miles traveled, but you don't say who there.
I'm not trying to reduce your miles traveled, sir. I'm not focusing on any one particular individual. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. We're trying to identify which people it can reduce their mileage, but we are not prescribing that. We are asking the municipalities across the state to work with their communities directly and try to identify those opportunities and then install the infrastructure or the programs or the systems that need to be in place so that in that community, they're able to bring that number down over time. Does that make sense? Or still, if you want, we can talk more. Okay, we'll talk more. Sure. Go ahead, Andy.
If I'm taking cattle to the auction, I'm not going to take them one at a time. If I load that stock trailer up, that's the more efficient.
Exactly.
And it basically cut miles down for that rancher.
Right. That's a pretty good rural program, it sounds like. More cattle per trailer, right? All right. Any other questions on it? You had one?
I do have a question on semis. You know, the semis are heavier, right? And so is that less grain you can fit on your semi?
Yeah, and that's the I think you asked that question, right? Right. Yes. You are reducing the payload by some degree. It's not major, but yes, it does happen. And I don't know if you heard, but the first battery electric semi trucks were just delivered in Albuquerque to Goodwill Industries of New Mexico, and they've been using them for about a month now. And I mean, they're hauling all kinds of things around Albuquerque now. But we talked to the driver for a good hour about the how the truck works and if it meets his needs. And he said that everything that they haul fits well within their payload requirements. But I do know that can be an issue.
What's the recharge time?
It varies. Pretty, it's a wide range, but it's getting better. The Tesla semi truck, they're still in the prototype phase, but they have developed and proven proof of concept that they can recharge that 500-mile range truck in about 30 minutes. That technology is not widespread yet, but I think it varies from 30 minutes all the way to an hour and a half, depending on the type of technology. I would say most vehicles right now in that truck class recharge in about 45 minutes to an hour. All right, I'm going to take one more question. I saw you had your hand up first.
I want to go back to the school bus. What is the range mileage on the school buses before they have to recharge?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm less familiar with the range on that one, but I believe I've read that it's about 150 for the average electric school bus right now, but that number continues to improve as well. And we also know that, I mean, we have data on how far the trips are that the schools typically travel. And so we know that it's not perfect for every situation or every trip, but it's enough range for a large majority of trips that are being traveled by schools. Yeah, right. And to be clear, we're not talking about recreational buses. We're talking about the average everyday yellow bus that's just driving around, picking up, dropping off. Okay.
What a lot of our local schools have is those small, but they have large mileages to travel.
Yeah. The range issues can become more of a problem in the rural areas for sure. And it doesn't mean that every school needs to be completely electrified, but if they're running routes that they already have that are within that range, then the technology is already there to support it. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. And I think we're moving into our buildings category. So, Robert, I'm going to invite you up to talk about that.
Okay, thanks, everybody. My name is Robert Gomez. I work for the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, the Energy Conservation and Management Division. ECMD is the state energy office. And our priority is that we are submitting to the PCAP are related to supporting access to energy efficiencies, retrofits of homes. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a solar panel on a house that's got a roof leaking, right? Or upgrade the electricity. So the kind of programs we're looking at. This also includes cleaning and these also have the potential to reduce energy burden. So basically, we're rolling out these kinds of programs, these energy efficiency programs, all in conjunction with other rebate programs that are going to roll out pretty soon. So you're getting a little advantage from appliance rebates. And then, the next part is to expand the community energy efficiency development block grant. Our office is is authorized by the legislature to implement state energy planning and distribution. And so this actually fits well within our scope of work and expand the reliability of energy. That's been my focus for the last couple of years is working on resilience, working on how do we buffer like those shocks when the lights go out, when emergency strikes. So battery backup, again, more human capacity building, that sort of thing to really protect people in their homes. So that's what we're working on briefly. So there's a lot more, but again, there's lots of side benefits. Oh, there's one more? Go for it. All right. So the solar plus storage for resilient. This is what I was getting at in my previous comment. So this is a grant program for local governments across the state to install solar and battery storage for your critical facilities. So there's lots of different things that can go with that, including cooling stations, warming areas, those kinds of things when people are displaced during emergency situations. Grid transmission capacity is improved. Those are some of the big highlights of that one. And of course, we again want to make sure that we New Mexicans get good paying jobs from this BIL money.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank
Did
you.
anyone have any questions for Robert?
By doing the solar storages and sort of things, are you going to be doing microgrids?
That's in the mix too, yes. I think the community input that we get will definitely inform how we approach this. So there's no upper limit on what we can gather. I think the more ideas, the better.
Okay. We're going to talk just briefly about the natural and working land sector. So there's a coalition of municipalities across the state. They've decided to work together to essentially try to set up a composting program for their residents. It's got this fancy name, organics waste diversion. It's just composting. But composting, food waste in particular, it does release a lot of greenhouse gases as it's decomposing. So the city of Las Cruces is leading this effort in partnership with the city of Albuquerque, city of Santa Fe, and who am I forgetting, Amy? Oh, Los Alamos. Anyone else? Yeah. Okay. Happy to take questions on it. It's not exactly our program, but I can try.
Well, not a question, but a statement. If it's composting aerobically, it's not going to release those gases. If it's anaerobic, then it has all kinds of gases it will release.
Right, and that's the intent is to get it to that point. Yeah.
Does this expand the manure plots
Right now, it would only apply to the cities who are participating, which are the ones I just listed. But if the city of Tucumcari were, I guess, to get involved in that, it's possible. But it may be focused on. It might just be focused on food waste. I think it is. Do you just food waste at the moment?
Are they having places where people can like bring it, or are they educating people on how to do it themselves?
Good question. So the question is, is it an education program, or is it focused on actually doing the composting? And the answer is the latter. They're actually trying to set up systems for collecting that food waste. That the cities have different plans on how they're managing it, but the general concept is to try and get it to a singular place where they can do that aerobic. Yeah. Okay. I think so let me just retouch on this workforce piece, which is that early on in this process, we weren't sure if we should have a workforce measure or if we should really try to make sure that it's deeply integrated into every single one of these programs. And as our work evolved, we really did find the importance of making sure that every single program is adequately supported with workforce and economic development. So it's no longer sort of its own individual measure as much as it is worked into everything else that we're doing. And I'm gonna see if Mike has anything he wants to talk about. You wanna do it now? All right, Mike Ford.
Good job. Give Colt a hand, guys. You did a great job. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll be short and sweet. Workforce development. We have all these projections about how much money we need to spend to this, that, and the other to make the energy transition real. And none of it really matters if it doesn't actually work for people, right? And make their lives better. So you need to have people ready and prepared to take advantage of the new jobs that are offered by this transition. So that's really where the measure comes in. And just to kind of level set, like there's a lot of workforce development programs in place right now. And there's the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, which funds, it goes through the Department of Workforce Solutions, and it funds all of the workforce development boards, the 4 regional workforce development boards here in New Mexico, who in turn coach the workforce connection centers that folks walk into when they are job seeking, and businesses walk into when they're looking for workers, and give them the training and help get them into positions where they can not just go into a new job, but go into a new career and make their lives better for themselves, for their families. The goal of this program is not to reinvent that wheel. We have a huge range of different jobs that we're going to need, from electricians for the EV charging stations to cement masons to plumbers and fitters, PV installers, to wind turbine technicians, which I hadn't really given thought to till we came here and learned about the programs that Mesa Lands has in partnership with Impact Energy, where they are actually taking students and giving them opportunities to work with Impact and become certified, which is pretty cool, I think. So there's a whole range, a whole gamut of skills that people are going to need, and one size does not fit all. And the needs of each part of this state are like so different. Like every single part of the state is completely different from the next one. Like if you know one part of New Mexico, you know one part of New Mexico. And so we are working with all 4 of those workforce boards to understand what each region needs. I got off the phone earlier today with somebody from the Central Workforce Board that represents Albuquerque, Bernalillo, Sandoval County. I haven't spoken, like, full disclosure, to the Eastern Board yet down in Roswell. We will be talking to all of them on March 6th, and the Department of Workforce Solutions has set up a conversation to figure out what each place needs and how we can fill gaps instead of reinventing the wheel to make every dollar that we get go as far as it possibly can. So that's my spiel. Thank you. Questions? Yes, Andy. I see community colleges playing a massive part in that. it's a big one. It's, it's in many ways, it's the main one for things like AAS certificates and, 1 to 2 year certification programs that are vocational in nature. We have everybody from Navajo Tech, DNA College, San Juan College in the Northwest, CNM obviously all over the center. We have ENMU, SENMU, Exhibit A, Mesa Lands. But but the partnership y'all have with Impact Wind is like an awesome one, and that's a great model. That's one where we wouldn't necessarily want to get involved because there's a wheel that's been invented right now between y'all, but there's gaps in every part of the state that we can hope to fill. Sometimes is with the curricula themselves, and other times it's with like wraparound services where there may be a class that is available to students with open spots in the class, but that doesn't mean students can get there and enroll. They may have, in a rural area like this, a long distance to travel. They may need childcare. They may be working a day job and be exhausted and need night classes. So, there's all sorts of needs across the regions. Some of them are statewide, some of them are local, and our job is to fill those gaps so that students that couldn't normally get access to this wonderful green energy economy can actually get access to it. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. The implementation grant, yes. Okay. Oh.
Thanks, Mike. It's a good question. I don't know that I have the most robust answer for you. But part of this process that I would say has really been a pain in the neck is the EPA is requiring us to identify all of the other grant opportunities that exist, not only from our state government, but also from all of the agencies across the federal government. And so that's one area that I've been really focused in, is trying to identify all of those opportunities that exist. And there are tons of programs, and I'm talking like several dozens of programs that are offering billions of dollars across the United States. Congress has already spent this money in the Inflation Reduction Act. And so it's up to departments like ours to figure out how do we bring investment that Congress made to our local communities, like here in Tucumcari. And so if we don't get this one, which I think we have a very strong case to get some of these dollars. If we don't get this one, we will continue to seek other funding opportunities to make sure that we can bring those funds here. And we will continue to point out to the federal government exactly how much they're investing in our state and make sure that it does not become disproportionate. We will make sure that we are holding the Biden administration accountable to make sure we get the investments that are necessary in this state. All right, so now maybe for the big thing we all want to talk about is the corridor project, right? Okay, so I opened it up earlier, and so I'll go back and hit those key points, and happy to take questions on this for as long as you like, but I would like to just give everyone an opportunity. I think we got about 50 minutes, and I want to at least reserve 30 of that for allowing you some time to fill these out and give us your thoughts on these measures. But happy to dive into the corridor project. So again, partnering with the state of Arizona and the state of Oklahoma. New Mexico is the lead applicant for the coalition. And our idea is to help move goods from the Port of Los Angeles, which is the largest seaport in the nation. Tons of goods come through that port. So if we can get those goods moved across half of the country along I-40, that will bring significant benefits to New Mexico. Not only the health and climate benefits and air pollution benefits that we've been talking about, but you're also you're putting those goods on trucks that have lower operational costs, which can generally bring the price of goods down over time. And especially as those vehicles begin to reach equivalent prices with the existing diesel trucks that are out there, that will only improve. And so you've heard about our clean truck measure and this corridor proposal, and they don't have to work together, but it would certainly be helpful. And this is the case that we're trying to make to the EPA to award both, is that if you have the truck incentives and you have the infrastructure that's necessary, then you can actually really start to pull this off. And so let me talk just briefly about each of the states. So in Arizona, starting, we'll just go down the whole corridor from west to east. Kingman, Arizona is the first site proposed in the corridor. It's about 300 miles from the Port of Los Angeles, but there's significant work going on in California to install similar types of infrastructure. So we're just going to let California fill that 300-mile gap themselves. And we've also, in this process, learned that there are several private companies who are really interested in this project, and they keep coming to us and knocking on our door, asking how they can get involved and how they can help, because they recognize that the country and the world is moving towards this zero-emission transportation economy. And as we begin to do that, they want to figure out how they can capitalize on it. And so what we're trying to do is make this initial public investment, public dollars, invest those here in our Southwest region that will then spur the private capital to follow. So as we go from east to west, one of the big gaps, the other big gaps that exist is in Amarillo, Texas. It would be helpful if we could have a station there that can support these trucks. We're not working with Texas in this coalition proposal, but we have heard from some private companies that if we get funded to do this, that they would be interested in installing a similar type of station in Amarillo with their own private capital. So this is an enabling action to really spur the growth of the entire corridor. So as we move from Kingman, Arizona, the state of Arizona is considering a potential site, possibly in the Flagstaff or Phoenix area, which I know Phoenix is off of I-40, but it does sort of make really graphic and logistical sense when you start to look at it on a map. So that's the second proposed site. And the third site in Arizona is in Winslow. From Winslow, the first site in New Mexico is currently proposed to be in Gallup. So we had a community meeting with them 2 weeks ago, and just like we're having today. And so there's some significant opportunity to invest in Gallup. Then in Albuquerque, there would be a significant logistical center that would have this electric charging infrastructure, the hydrogen infrastructure, and also the renewable energy generation to support the energy that goes into these trucks. So there's really significant growth potential for that Albuquerque site. Then now we're in Tucumcari as the next site. So if you start to think about the ranges of these, except for those two kind of gaps identified in Amarillo and in California, most of these sites are spaced approximately, on average, about every 200 miles, which is well within the range of the current technology, which is also improving. So there's a significant opportunity to work here with Mesa Lands on this opportunity. And we're also, in addition to just talking about the infrastructure, we're trying to figure out, what is it how can we best support Mesa Lands Community College to continue developing the workforce that's needed. And the grant opportunity is flexible, so it gives us the ability to invest in that workforce directly. And so we're trying to figure out what is it that Mesa Land needs to support their existing programs, and what additional programs might Mesa Lands be able to implement to train the workers who are ultimately going to build, construct, operate, and maintain these systems. So I think there's some real, and this is, we had a conversation earlier today with Andy and some of his team, and it's an incredible opportunity to see what's going on here in Tucumcari, and to figure out how we can best support not only this city, not only our state, but really this entire Southwest region with the kind of jobs that Mesa Lands can help us fill. All right, going on from Tucumcari, then we skip across. There's not going to be one in Amarillo with the proposal, but to get to the first site in Oklahoma, which is tentatively proposed to be Elk City, Oklahoma. I think it's about 270 miles, so just a little bit further, which makes it still technically feasible even without the Amarillo site. But we do hope that we are spurring that private investment as well. And then from Elk City, which is in the far east side of Oklahoma, the next major site would be Oklahoma City, and the state of Oklahoma is still trying to figure out where that last stop might be, but probably, obviously somewhere in western Oklahoma. So eastern. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I know. I am admittedly from a rural town in Oklahoma. Yes. So I should know this. Okay, so we've talked about all of the cities that are included, and the type of infrastructure that we're trying to build. And so we've really focused on charging, refueling infrastructure. And then this third piece is like the energy generation, renewable energy generation that supports the trucks. But I would also add that we are allowing the planning for each of the sites to be really controlled by the people who, like, for example, Mesa Lands Community College and the city of Tucumcari. We're trying to allow those entities to have the flexibility to build the type of site that they want. And so what we've started to hear across this corridor is people have different priorities. Great. Some sites are really interested in turning these into full-scale logistical centers. That's kind of what I was getting at with the Albuquerque site. They're proposing to build it near the, we talked about it earlier, the Double Eagle Airport, which not only ties in, allows air traffic to participate in the logistical process, it also allows the rails that run through our state to connected with these ground transportation systems. So they're really trying to turn it into a logistical center that also has a big travel stop, a travel center, if you will, which could include all types of businesses, or maybe just the necessary things that truck drivers need, like showers and facilities to stop and take a break and rest. So there's a lot of flexibility how each place can build their facilities out. But at the core of each one of those is that essential infrastructure that we talked about for recharging, refueling, and powering those trucks. Okay, I think that's enough of me talking. So I'm gonna, Michael, do you have anything to wrap up with, or should we just open it up for questions in general? Okay, happy to take questions from the whole team. Sure.
I'm wondering if the girl has an electric flatbed Ford.
I suppose you could retrofit the Lightning, right? I'm sure you could.
A question I
family's been in, I'm the fifth generation in the transportation industry. And who's, I mean, to recharge these vehicles, you said it's going to cost less than filling up with diesel, but you got a time factor there. You know, I'm gonna have a guy sitting there drawing $27, $28 an hour or $35 an hour, whatever, while I'm waiting to get charged. How's that going to be cheaper for me in the long run?
Right. Yeah, it is a good question. I don't know that I have the perfect answer for you on that. But the cost savings between electricity and diesel are really significant. But not only does the truck driver, sort of have that downtime, but it also allows them to rest, which is a significant piece of the job.
Yeah, but 200 miles, I mean, between charging stations, that's nothing to a truck driver.
Yeah.
That's next door.
Right.
You know.
Does your mind change if it's 500 miles on the Tesla? I mean, is that enough to?
Well, yeah, that's a more efficient way to do
Sure.
it. But you don't have the technology to do that.
Yeah.
To do the 500 miles.
Yeah, and so let's also talk about one additional piece, which is, I mean, we kind of focused in on the electric truck so far. There's also the hydrogen-powered fuel cell truck. And it's a rather complex technology, but essentially what it does is you refuel the hydrogen tank, and then that hydrogen is it's converted into electricity. Okay, and those have a significantly greater range on average than the electric trucks. They also take far less time to fill up. I mean, it's not that different than just filling up with diesel. So it is relatively quick. And we also understand that there's this difference between short haul and long haul. And so the short haul trucks, it's more efficient, it's more cost effective if it's an electric truck than any other option available, including diesel right now. And the same, we think it's definitely headed in that direction to make it more economical to operate a hydrogen-powered truck than even a diesel vehicle. But they do have the longer range and shorter fill-up time. Yes.
So how close are we to the hydrogen fuel trucks?
It's a great question. There are several operating. I don't know. Does anyone on my team know exactly how many are operating? No. Yeah, there are none currently in New Mexico, but they are operating right now in California and Arizona, I know for a fact. The manufacturer that's producing those is Nikola and JB. I think JB Hunt is just buying. Oh, they are? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So you talk about it being cheaper and so forth. One thing that I haven't heard addressed is what are we going to do? What are we doing? Because my understanding, there's no tax on this electricity that helps repair these road infrastructure and so forth like that, and that's a major cost. How are we going to address that?
It's a good question, and I alluded to this earlier and tried, but maybe I can do a better job. But essentially, that question is really up to the New Mexico Department of Transportation to figure out above anyone else. And so we've been having conversations with them about how to do that. They are very tuned into that problem. I mean, we understand that if we're transitioning the entire state's vehicles over a period of time to electricity or hydrogen, that eats away at that gas tax that supports our roads. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want to drive on any worse roads than currently exist. So we need to figure it out. And I'm aware. Yeah, very aware. I completely understand. And we're very aware of it, and we're trying to figure it out. But it's not up to our department to necessarily solve that problem. But we are trying our best to help the State Department of Transportation to answer that question. I don't want to speak for what NMED is proposing.
Well, it just seems part of the puzzle that's not being addressed.
Yeah.
And to help the New Mexico Department of Transportation
Right.
make those decisions, seems to me like.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add too is that the Biden administration's bipartisan infrastructure law is also beginning to make really significant investments across the state. And you can see that on some of our road signs. And
But their investment is being invested with making a higher national debt. We've got to pay that back.
well, I'm not, I know.
Into account and all this, we've got to pay for this.
I understand.
Grandiose plan, and I like the looks of it, but when I look at it from a personal point and look at my pocketbook, how do I pay for this stuff that's so far out of reach of my monetary capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand the problems around the national debt. I'm not going to get into it. But the point is, Congress has acted through the Inflation Reduction Act. They already spent the money, right? The money is already allocated. So it is our job to make sure that we get those investments in our state. I mean, I can't do anything about Congress passing more bills, but, you know, okay. Did you have a question?
My question is kind of a follow-up to his in that, but yeah, you got a big infusion of money to get roads fixed, but when this plan comes into existence where the electronic cars or electric cars or vehicles they use, will the plan be in place to pay for the roads before we get converted over and lose that gas tax?
I can't speak to what the Department of Transportation is doing, but
You're the ones that are implementing this clean energy thing, Department of Transportation, and it's all under the same administration. So you guys need to work together to get
right.
this sorted out before those plans get implemented.
Yes, sir. No, I completely understand that it's a significant problem. And like I said, the legislature has also begun to think about this and try to take action on it. I can't speak to when they're going to address the issue comprehensively either. But we, like I said earlier too, we're not working in a silo. We understand these problems, and I appreciate you bringing it up again, but we are trying to work with our other departments. I had a question here first. Can I go here first? Okay.
You guys haven't talked about what is the upkeep of these electric vehicles. I mean, I know the EV batteries, you know, they can catch fire and go bad. The tires have to be special tires because you're running heavier vehicles. So what is the eventual upkeep of all these vehicles that you're going to be having?
That's a good question. So the question is about the maintenance and upkeep of the vehicles themselves. And we've modeled this recently, actually. And what does it actually cost to purchase, maintain, and operate a vehicle?
But what if the battery burns? I mean,
well, let me answer one piece at a time. All right. So we're looking at what does it cost to purchase, maintain, and operate over the life of the vehicle. And when you look at what type of maintenance is required for an electric vehicle, it's far less than the maintenance you have to keep up with on a gasoline vehicle. Part of the reason is because you don't have a motor or you don't have that engine, right? And so you have far less moving parts, and that means that there's far less maintenance on these vehicles. There's a myth going around that battery electric vehicles catch on fire more often than gas vehicles. It's false. It's absolutely true that electric vehicles catch on fire more than gasoline vehicles. What I will say is that when the electric vehicles catch on fire, the outcome tends to be worse because it's hard to put a battery fire out compared to gasoline or diesel catching on fire. But it's a far lower incidence rate if you actually look at the data between the two types of vehicles. Did I answer your questions?
Still not convinced.
Okay. I can't convince everyone. Yes. Oh, sorry. I had you first.
Well, all I was gonna say, when you start telling these people about the legislation and anything about gas taxes, actually, what was passed this year was more and more incentives to buy more and more electric cars. We're giving taxpayers money to people to buy cars. We're not addressing the gas tax whatsoever. And it's the green thinking in the legislature that we have to promote electric cars through more and more incentives to get people to buy more and more electric cars. If there's no request to raise taxes, anything to fund the roads. That's the true thing that's happening in
I understand your concern, but I would say it's absolutely false that no one is trying to address that question. I mean, there were bills introduced to do that, so the legislature is thinking about it. But I understand. I get the point.
But why would you offer incentives and then say, well, we're going to raise the registration?
The registration fee is not increasing under the current
The registration
credit.
fee is the only thing that you can charge an electric car.
Okay, there are other proposals other than just increasing the registration fee. I'm not familiar with them because I'm not directly involved in this question. I understand that you are, but sir, I can't allow this gas tax conversation to continue going. It's okay. I just want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to ask questions. I can't answer your question, so I'm going to just have to move on. Okay. There was one. Sure.
Amp hours, meters can be put on electric charging stations. And if you put your credit card in an electric charging station, it can charge you for the amp hours that you put into your battery. A tax can be charged per amp hour. And I think it's very
That is one of the alternatives, yes. But I apologize, I'm not more familiar with the other methods. You had a question, I think.
Yeah, I just had, from what I understand, and I just don't know a lot about them, when a electric vehicle is disabled for whatever reason, or whatever, they have to be placed far apart from, I mean, they can't be right next to one another because of, I don't know, safety, whatever. This is just what I read. And it may be false information. But I don't know how many times you've driven down I-40 during a snowstorm, but we have piles and piles of trucks. What do we, or if they were electric, you know, how, we need acres and acres to space them all out so that they're not unsafe or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're talking or asking about, sort of a wrecked vehicle and possibly maybe the fire risks or some other type of risk that's associated with them and parking them close together. I mean, I could see that being an issue if there was a potential fire risk from a wrecked vehicle, you wouldn't want to put it close to another vehicle that's also wrecked, right? And I mean, it could just cascade out of into a chain reaction, I suppose. But I'm sorry, I don't entirely. Yeah, that's interesting. Sure, and I haven't heard a whole lot about that, but okay. Was there a question? Sure.
I believe what William's asking is when the road shuts down because it's iced up, and these trucks have nowhere to charge up, how are they gonna get them off the road once the battery's dead?
How,
That was the question you were trying to address.
I mean, the whole issue of when we get icy roads,
Yes, ma'am, I
it's
understand.
piled up, and I mean, there's gonna be issues with that.
Yes, ma'am,
Have we
because
thought
they're
about
gonna-
those things?
They're going to eventually run out of battery, because sometimes these roads stay closed up to 12, 24 hours.
right. Okay. I think I better understand the question, which is. Right. Okay, so I'll address at least part of that question, which is, I think, sort of similar to, and just for the moment, I'm just going to leave the weather piece out of it. But in general, what do you do when you run out of gas on the interstate? Hopefully you have a friend you can call, but maybe you don't. And so then you have to probably call your insurance company or someone to come deliver some gas to you, right? And those same exact types of services are available right now. Companies like AAA have trucks that are essentially just a big battery on the back that they can pull up and directly charge that vehicle, even if it's stalled on the side of the road. So that technology does exist, and there are people working on that problem, and there's an entire business model around how to solve that problem. But I suppose if the interstate runs out of power, yeah, that's probably an issue. But the same issue would be true if everyone on the interstate ran out of gas, right? Did you want to clarify on that?
I want to ask my question.
Okay, sure.
Senator Wood had a question about how we're going to do it with tax and stuff. If I can look in a crystal ball, what I see is something like Georgia Pike, Houston, Texas. We're going to have a lot of toll roads. That's going to cost the trucks more money to get to where they're going, or the vehicles more money to get to where they're going, because they use the toll fees to actually fix the roads.
Sure. I suppose it's possible that that could be a proposal to help fill the gas tax issue. But okay, we are at almost 7:40, so I'm going to stop taking questions at large. So my whole team will be around probably a little bit past 8 o'clock. We're here to answer any additional questions you have. But I would really like to ask you to go around to each of these and write down what you think your pros or cons are specific to carry. Okay, so if a particular program you think can really benefit or disadvantage your community for some reason, or if you just generally support or oppose, please write it on each of these sticky notes around here. Okay. All right, we will be around and answering questions for you. Thank you all so much for coming out on a Thursday night. I know it's not easy to do, so I appreciate you being here and allowing us to share this space with you. And thank you to the gracious hosts of the Mesa Alliance Community College. Let's give them a round of a hand.
A little red button there. I'll let you do it. Thank you.